He is from Postmedia, as mentioned, at least in my world, my claim to fame. He's my mom's favorite reporter, but he's also my favorite reporter. He has been on the Flames beat for almost a decade now. Wes Gilbertson joins us. What?
Me being your mom's favorite reporter is not your claim to fame. That's my claim to fame.
I'm sorry. Is that okay? I thought it was mine.
You're going to have to get your own.
Right. Yeah, no, I'm looking desperately for a claim to fame. I have yet to find it.
Well, I just picked mine up, so.
No, I've told you that before. How are you, by the way?
I'm good, buddy. How about yourself?
I'm good. Thank you so much for coming in. I know we tried, but we always call it, hey, why don't you come in today? It's green garbage bag day. Like, why don't you pick a day which is not,
today's a good day.
But having said that, you're working tonight, aren't you?
I think, I'll go watch some Wranglers hockey.
Yeah, okay.
Sure. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
You were at game 1 on Wednesday?
I was, and I enjoyed it. It wasn't the best hockey game you've seen in your life. The locals hadn't played in 11 days, and you could tell.
Yeah.
But listen, there's some kids there to get excited about, led by obviously the guy in net and in Dustin Wolf, the AHL MVP, and it was fun to watch. I was hoping to see a few more people at the Saddle Dome on Wednesday. I think they drew just under 6,000.
Okay.
Sounds like it's going to be a lot more than that tonight, and that'll be fun. This is a team that deserves the support.
Yeah, and especially after languishing in Stockton for all those years and really, kind of away from everything, right? 6,000's a miracle, but we all both know, and we've been around. We know when the Hitmen go on a long run, usually it's about the second or third run that it kicks in, and then it becomes a spectacle, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And languishing not only in Stockton geographically, but we talked about it, and you and I am sure have had the conversation a million times over the years. This is an organization that did not have a lot of guys in the minors to be excited about.
No.
For a long time.
No.
And so, to have Dustin Wolf there, to have Jacob Pelche there, unfortunately, I think Mathew Phillips is probably no longer a Flames prospect after this summer when he hits unrestricted free agency. But there's a guy that people in this city where he grew up, played midget AAA, should still be excited about. Connor Zary's and another guy on the rise there. And so not only do you finally have the future of the Flames in your own backyard, but there is a legitimate prospects there. We're not talking about a bunch, and they have some journeymen. There's lots of guys who've played in the NHL. I think Brett Sutter as their captain is a remarkable story. And yet the reason there'll be 10,000 people there tonight and hopefully more down the road, and I'm just ballparking those numbers, I don't know, but it's because of those kids that are the future of this team.
Yeah.
Dustin Wolf was the best player the other night.
Yep.
Jacob Pelche scores in overtime.
Yep. What about Jeremy Poirier, the defenseman? I don't profess to know a lot of this kid, but you don't accidentally make the all-rookie team on defense, right?
No, you don't. And he's a guy that has a ton of offensive upside. We've known that. He's a guy who dropped in the draft because teams wondered if he could defend. And to be frank, I think teams wondered if he cared to defend sometimes.
Sure.
And the Flames have really dug in on that part development-wise. I know every time I talk to Jeremy, as you know, in the media, you're typically talking to these guys because they've done something offensively.
Yeah, it's true.
They scored 2 goals or they just had a big weekend or they were named to the all-rookie team. He's worked really hard on the defensive bit. And I thought the amount that he played, obviously in overtime, you need to score a goal as well. But I thought the amount he played in overtime in game 1 was pretty telling. So
Love has trust in him.
Yeah, he's starting to trust him. Now he's out there. He's out there with a veteran. He's not running his own pairing or anything like that.
No.
But this is a 20-year-old defenseman in the second best league in the world, and I think there's a lot to be encouraged about there.
Well, it almost seems like an MO, and maybe it's now an MO of the previous regime, but an MO because Anderson and Shillington both came into that draft falling like rocks too. One because of the shape, and the other one, I think, because I just don't think anybody thought Shillington was going to play defense either, if I remember correctly.
Absolutely.
So it's when you don't get high first round picks, and when you have to make decisions about where you're picking in the first round, it's nice to be able to hit on a few of these.
I mean, they selected a Norris Trophy winner in the 3rd round for very much the same reason. And obviously, there's a lot more that goes into the Adam Fox story, but these.
Are we allowed to talk about that?
about Adam Fox?
Well, it's just I brought it up. You know, we were talking about Tree leaving last week and everything, and I made the comment. What if Adam? What's the legacy of Tree living if Adam Fox is here? And all I got was, well, they knew he wasn't. No. That's not the point. I know the history. I know all of that. But man, if that kid, if you kept that kid, drafted that kid, kept that kid, what's the legacy here? Because that's a, you know, Norris Trophy. It's one thing for Giordano to get it. He was in his 30s. This kid was, you know, what, 2 years in the league when he won it.
Yeah, absolutely. And to answer your question, at least from my standpoint, I think it's a complicated question because there's two parts that go into it. The trade that brought Elias Lindholm and Noah Hannafin to Calgary is considered one of the more impactful trades, certainly that Brad made as GM, but one of the more impactful trades in, you know, the recent or even not so recent history of the Flames franchise.
I think so, yeah.
And yet I've asked the question over beers with buddies, kind of wondering out loud, could you have got that trade done without Adam Fox? Adam Fox wasn't the reason that the Carolina Hurricanes were making that trade. They wanted Dougie Hamilton. And so I wonder if you could have done that trade a different way. Now, I don't think it was changing the fact that...
Because folks, remember, he never stayed in Carolina either.
Right. He didn't want to be in Carolina.
No.
In fact, Adam Fox didn't just want to play for a handful of teams. Adam Fox wanted to play for one team.
Yep.
He was always going to be a New York Ranger. And
so Tim Erickson, by the way, I just throw that out there.
Yeah, that one didn't work out quite as well for the Rangers. But I think it's fair to always wonder if you could have leveraged Adam Fox for more from the Rangers. At that point, he was looking like a really good prospect. He wasn't looking like a future Norris Trophy winner. I don't think you would have projected what we see now from Adam Fox. And yet it does complicate, I think, the legacy of Brad Treliving is that based on what I know, he found out recently that Adam Fox wasn't willing to be a Calgary Flame. I don't think he was ever a throw-in in that trade, but I wonder, listen, when a guy goes and is winning Norris trophies elsewhere and you're not sure how to kind of equate what you got for him, it's fair to ask.
Well, and I liked how you phrased it. It's a complicated question. Yeah, it is. And it's intended to be a complicated question. And, you know, to me, it begs to another complicated question because you lost Matthew Tkachuk after his second deal. Why? And I think there's a lot of reasons. I think it's, you know, and this is sexy and flashy to say this week. I think part of it's the arena. You know, you heard Mackenzie Weegar talk about it. It's not the greatest place to go play and work and all of those sort of things. You've seen some of these palatial offices for these players, if you want to call them that. There's some really nice facilities, right?
Absolutely.
You know, so I think there's
ones where you don't have to park outside in winter.
Right. And for us, that seems like, oh, a luxury, but that's what these guys are getting sold on, right? When you come here, what are you touring? What are you touring them? Right now, you're taking them out to Banff and showing them Banff, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And you're right. That's a part of it. And I think, you know, where Adam Fox and Matthew Tkachuk are so much different and where the Matthew Tkachuk one is always going to really hurt the people of Calgary is he had a chance to see what makes this such a great city.
Yes.
He had a chance to experience the way that you walk on water in this city when you're one of the Flames star players, you know, the treatment that you get in this city, everything that can come with everything that they want to sell you on about being a Flame. They didn't get that far with Adam Fox because he was just going to be a Ranger.
Right.
And his mind was made up. And I suppose good on him. He was betting on himself that he was going to be a star player and he was going to write his own ticket. Now, you know, would you like if you draft a player and develop him to have him be loyal to your organization? Absolutely. But I think you didn't even get to the part where you can try to sell them on, we get that the rink, you know, you can only say it has character so many times before you're saying it's old.
Yeah.
And so I think what makes the Matthew Tkachuk situation hurt and why the Columbus departure of Johnny Gaudreau will always sting is they saw what people in Calgary want them to see.
Yep.
And they still decided to leave. Adam Fox didn't get that far.
No, he didn't. No. And again, it's woulda, coulda, shoulda, and all of that stuff. I get that. But, as you look at, to me, it's, and I don't plan on spending a whole lot of time on the rink with you. Cause I'll get David Lagan for that. Yeah. I understand. No,
those numbers are way over my head.
But to me, it's also, it's complicated here. Like, again, if, I keep saying again, but if Calgary Next was built the way Calgary Next was proposed and Matthew Tkachuk and Johnny Gaudreau were playing in that facility, that may have changed it. If there was a different coach, that may have changed it, or maybe it wouldn't have at all. Maybe they just, want to be close, as Gaudreau said, close to the biggest children's hospital in America. And Matthew doesn't want to pay any taxes, and he can go to Florida and not pay any taxes. Could be as simple as that.
And this happens in every city. You're always, when guys leave, you're looking for reasons, right?
Yeah.
I know there's a sense out there, well, if they just fire Daryl, then Backlund will want to stay and Lindholm will want to stay. Is it that simple? Is that why they're potentially wavering on their future?
I agree with Rhett Warner. Rhett Warner on the Barn Burner one day, I thought I had a great clip. So it's Daryl's fault. Like, everything's Daryl's fault. Like, it's easy to scapegoat one thing. And to your point, I look at Michael Backlund in the same way, not as a player, but it reminds me a little bit of Beret Bork. Like, he showed loyalty, could never get to where he wanted to go. You know what? I got to go somewhere and try. Yeah. That's what it looks like to me. He's what else is he supposed to do? And the thing that will, and the reason, Wes, you are my mom's favorite reporter, is because you are the best at just telling the story. Very rarely do we get into your opinions, and you're never on social media, which we can get into. But so I'll say this:
as long as I'm not tweeting injury videos from practice, right?
Yeah, no. She's okay with that. It's more of the, subtly becoming the advancer of stories that are positive. Just tell me what I need to know. I'll make up my own mind, kind of thing. And for Backlund, I just think, I just think he's should have been the captain, wasn't the captain, probably doesn't want to be coached this way. And really, he's looking around going, I got a couple more years. Mm-hmm. So let me go somewhere. And that's happened, to your point. That's not a Calgary thing. That's everywhere. Lots of guys leave to chase. Right?
Absolutely.
Leave to
chase whatever.
Right.
Chase. There's guys that leave to chase Stanley Cups. And if that is Michael Backlund's decision after 900 and some games in a Flames uniform, you have to respect it. Lots of guys leave to chase money.
Nothing wrong with it. That's a business.
They're at this point, and there is loyalty to their team and their buddies, but they're independent contractors.
100%.
And they have
been locked out twice in the last 2 decades.
Yeah. And have a chance to further their careers as they see fit. Now, as a team that was talking 9 months ago, less than that, about, hey, we think we can win a cup here. Mm-hmm. When you, as fans, hear Michael Backlund, your most loyal player, come out at the end of that season and say, and this is not how he said it, but he essentially was saying, I'm not sure we can win a cup here.
Yep.
Well, that's going to elicit a very emotional response. And that's what...
As it should. That's why you have that process.
Absolutely.
And you've not done enough of it where nothing comes out of it. It's the stock answers that it's kind of shocking in a way when you do get the honesty, right?
Sure. And that's what makes being a fan so great. You should be yelling at your TV when you find out that one of your guys wants to leave or that he doesn't think you can win a cup. You should be invested in what needs to happen next for this organization to get back on track.
It's funny. This all started with the Wranglers. We'll get back to the Wranglers in a second. Were you at all taken aback by what we heard on that final day? And only because, and again, it's too easy to make an observation and say it's always this way, but it wasn't just one or two. There were 3 or 4 really, chewy stories in there.
Yeah, there was a freshness to it this year that you don't often get. Mm-hmm. And by that, I mean that because they were eliminated right at the very end, there wasn't, sometimes by the time you get to garbage bag day. I always call it locker clean out day.
Yeah.
Sometimes
You've already done it.
You've kind of healed.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
You've had a chance to digest it. You've had a chance to, quite frankly, you've answered the questions about it for 4 weeks sometimes. And so
Right.
I don't know if I was surprised, but the emotion was still lingering this year. The emotion was very real on that day. And that got you, I wrote, and I know others kind of assessed it the same way. Like Michael Backlund pausing when he was asked if he'd re-signed was arguably more telling than what he ultimately said.
Agreed.
And he said plenty.
Yep.
We heard a lot of fascinating things. We heard Mackenzie Weegar, the man who built the new event center.
Well, you're not,
but
you almost got the sense for the history of the Flames, you're not allowed to talk about that stuff. Like, we don't talk about. I just remember, I think Mark Giordano talked about the building like once.
Yeah.
Right. Like, nobody ever says that stuff.
No. And
they should. Don't get me wrong. They should have.
Yeah. And I think it caught a lot of people by surprise, maybe for that reason.
Right.
But, coming and listen, I'm just joking. Mackenzie Weegar is not the reason the deal got done, but a guy who's signed up for 8 years, who's made a commitment, when he makes that kind of comment, certainly, at least in the organization, they felt it.
Yep. Sure they did.
Because it's embarrassing.
Mm-hmm.
When one of your players is making fun of your home rink, and there's some irony in the fact that it was Mackenzie Weegar getting toured through the locker room that created a social media storm about how dated the rink is.
Yeah.
But, when one of your guys is taking shots at the rink, it's embarrassing for the organization. The Calgary Wranglers are in the Calgary Flames room now for their playoff run. That's because they don't have a locker room at the Saddle Dome.
That's right.
Like that, it's past due.
And God bless our friend Rick Tulsi, who does an amazing job of showing behind the scenes. And he's tweeting, but look at this. They're in there. They're in an actual NHL dress. I mean, please, Rick, don't do this. Rick, don't do this.
I always get a chuckle when the door opens for the tour and it's like, this is the media lounge.
Yeah. Oh, yes. Yeah. Media lounge and, whatever else we need it to be.
These are my cracker crumbs here. I'll just see if I can clean those up.
Oh, it's it is what it is.
And I was just having a conversation last night. Like, I do think it's a shame, and let's see what happens with, the politics of this arena are not going away anytime soon. The Saddle Dome has been such a cool part of Calgary's skyline.
Absolutely.
I do think it's a shame that however many years in the future, that's not going to be there. And I was having this conversation last night. I was on my way to a Wranglers practice at Winsport, and I was driving sort of through the new development. I think they call it Trinity Hills at the bottom of Winsport. And I was thinking the same thing earlier this week about the ski jump. This is an iconic part of Calgary's history that I hope.
It's a skyline piece.
Yeah, I hope it's always there. The Saddle Dome is going to be an empty 19,000 seat arena. It can't always be there. I think that's too bad. It's been such a cool piece of Calgary's history, but it's time. It's time for that building to be replaced.
I'm not 100% sure where people are going to go now to take pictures on Scotsman Hill. Like, what are they taking pictures of now? Right? Because how many people go up there to get that picture looking west into downtown? We've all done it. We've all seen it, to the point where I said that I said you guys really should put advertising on it, because since so many photos,
absolutely,
put a sponsor on it, put a big giant QR code for tickets. I don't care, but there's so many photos taken that way, right?
Rob, I pride myself in being able, off the top of my head, to come up with a list of, say, Calgary's 60 most picturesque tee boxes. So send me a note, reach out to me, and I've got some suggestions for you.
Trust me, we are going to get there yet. We are well on our way. Okay. Take me back almost, I guess, 11 days now. My first question for you, were you surprised by what happened a week ago this past Monday? Were you surprised that the team parted ways with the general manager, that the general manager, for all intents and purposes, the general manager parted ways with the team?
Yeah, I guess I was surprised, certainly when that press release landed in my inbox. I wasn't anticipating it. I don't think based on the season they had, I don't think I can say I was surprised that there would be changes.
Yep.
Of course there were going to be, and I'm surprised. I wondered, because those of us who have been around the Saddledome know Brad's investment level and the way he works, and the fact that there's always a phone to his ear, and the way he wears losses. Like, if you've ever been on the media elevator with Brad Treliving after a loss in mid-December, you'd think they just lost game 7 of a playoff series. And I say that in a complimentary way in a lot of senses. This is a guy who cared so much. And as we debated in the media room whether there'd be a change in that office, what it always came back to for me is, I just wonder if Brad can walk away from it. And I wonder if we knew he was frustrated, and we've heard more and more about the way his relationship with Daryl had headed south. But I still wondered, he built this team. He was proud of the way he built this team. They had a junk season, and I wasn't sure that he could say, it's time for me to do something different. And so that part maybe surprised me. I think if the Calgary Flames announced that they decided not to bring back Brad, and I think he's a hell of a general manager, but if you just based it on results, we've been to the second round twice. We missed the playoffs 4 times during his tenure. We just had we just underachieved.
Disappointing
horribly.
season. Sure.
Yeah. If you decided to make a change, that wouldn't have shocked me. The fact that it was Brad who said, you know what? No, thanks. That part caught me by surprise a little.
Yeah. I wasn't surprised that there was a parting. I think, when it was all said and done and the dust settled, that, the general manager said, I'm good. I'll go somewhere else. That to me was more damning than the other way. That leads me to, there should be some questions asked here. Really should be some questions asked here. And I mean, I say it all the time, and no disrespect to you or any of your brethren, but because you can't say, as you have to back things up. When Mike Russo reported in The Athletic that the Zucker trade fell apart because they couldn't get a hold of the owner to approve the trade, that's a shining light into how business is done. And I'm not suggesting it's only listen, I wouldn't want to work for Bill Foley in Vegas. What job security is there, right? Like, oh, you didn't win the second round. Goodbye. I would say that Murray Edwards operates in the same way that most NHL owners operate. I'm not suggesting anything other than that. But I also don't think that Brad, I don't think Brad hired Daryl. I don't think that. I think Brad was encouraged to make that decision. I think owners, Murray loves Daryl, and Daryl is, has a reputation and a good one. I mean, he won, right? But I don't think that was the general manager hiring a coach. Do you?
Well, I don't think it was the general manager with a gun to his head.
Okay.
Now, what I was thinking of this as you were mentioning, the Jason Zucker deal that fell apart at the deadline a few years ago. One of the things that makes it so tough is that, quite frankly, there's not a lot of people who know what's going on at the Saddledome. That's a very
tight ship.
Absolutely. Brad Treliving was telling coworkers on a Wednesday that he wasn't coming back, and we didn't find out until the following Monday.
Yep.
Elliot didn't find out. Frank didn't find out, and nobody found out.
Nope.
They just got a rink deal done.
Yeah.
Nobody was talking about it.
They got a rink in principle.
My apologies. Can we edit that part?
Yeah, sure.
I don't want to get
don't
in
worry
trouble.
about it.
Yeah, no. Okay. You got my back
me
there.
Being prickish here because
no, but you're right. Like my point is, if we're having so much trouble getting sort of behind the scenes information out of the Saddledome, it's really hard to tell, well, how involved is Murray? Where did this break down? Is it Murray and Daryl over here and Brad over here? That's sort of...
Well, I go back to Rhett. I think that, and I'm guilty of saying, I'm guilty of making that assumption. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that there's, there is ownership plays a large role.
Absolutely.
And management. And so, we all know how hard Brad works.
Yeah.
Nobody works harder. Brad's in on everything. all the time. And we saw what he did last year. You know, he proverbially pulled the rabbit out of his hat, whatever you want to say. But he still does that, recognizing that he has to go right up the chain all the time, right?
Mm-hmm.
And at some point, you want to make your own decisions. At some point, having to justify, or are you sure because the last time you did this, it didn't work? That I just think, and Rhett's right. Like, it's not all Daryl. It's not all Murray. It's the building. It's to be quite honest, sometimes I feel like they need to exercise some demons in there. Wasn't there a movie about the Pope's exorcist? I think they got to go in there sometime and just exercise whatever demons are in there.
It's not a bad idea.
They're this. I keep saying this. It's not a criticism. It's an observation. They're the safest team in the National Hockey League. What do they do risky, right? They're very safe. But as a result, they've drafted no higher than 4th. Twice. No higher than 4th. We're not allowed to say the rebuild word. Why? Because we're children? Is that why? Come on, that's not even a John Bean thing. That's a Jay Feaster thing. So for some of the kids to prop it up going, can you believe I've heard this movie before. Remember when Feaster got in all that trouble because he went on TSN and said, oh, we're rebuilding, but my job's to make the playoffs.
Right.
That was a controversy. Right? Like, I think they're too safe.
Well, and rebuilding is messy.
Oh,
and
not a guarantee.
Well, and here's the question I always ask. You know, I go back to, I grew up around here.
Yep.
Most of my buddies are Flames fans. You know, inevitably, if we go out for a beer, part of the conversation is what's happening with the Flames. And so I've heard over and over from buddies, from whoever over the years, they should rebuild, they should rebuild, they should rebuild. And I always ask one question. Will you buy tickets while they stink? It's a really important question.
It's the most important question.
And oftentimes the answer is, to be honest, probably not.
Right.
And so Murray Edwards, after a crummy season, is an easy target. Murray Edwards
sure he is.
Puts $80-some million into salary. Plus whatever he's putting into everything else. The rest of those people at the Saddle Dome aren't working for free.
Right.
I understand the frustration with the owner. I understand that people want to know more about his involvement.
Yep.
And yet, if you own a company that you're at least trying to break even on,
right,
you want butts in the seats, you want playoff dates, you want all that stuff.
I agree.
Rebuilds are messy because this is not a city that is going to show up in droves to support a team in mid-February that stinks.
Nope.
We know that.
We know that.
And so, yeah, it would be, listen, Connor Bedard would be awesome. Every team would love him. I don't care if it's the teams that are still playing.
Yeah.
If it's the teams that are home already, they all want
sure they do.
Connor Bedard.
Sure.
The process of actually getting Connor Bedard in a market like this is messy.
Well, and let me just say this, and I don't think I have to, but I will anyway. I am not at all looking for a rebuild. I don't think this is the time for a rebuild. I just find it funny that that's that one piece that does point back to ownership. I'm not allowed to say the R word.
Right.
Okay. And you're exactly right. I don't have the $1 billion. I don't write the checks. You write the checks. I will say this. What was the team you covered before this team?
The Stampeders?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I always said about them when they were going through the Frederick Fateri thing that you don't really own a team. You hold it in public trust. That you are holding it in public trust for the rest of the city. And that the donkey show that was the Fredericks and Fateri was embarrassing. And to me, the neatest part about that was it really showed us that there was this diehard, galvanized, small group, not small, but group of fans. Those are the ones that you could not have done anything more to this organization to make it a laughing stock, yet they still went.
Yeah.
That they still went. They scared away all the casual observers. They scared away all the nobody went except the diehards, right? And that's when you hold the team in public trust.
Yeah.
You cut the checks, absolutely 100%. But you do hold the team in public trust.
And all that's changed since that era.
Yeah.
What was that? Early 2000s?
That was 2002, 2003, 2004 in that range. Yeah.
All that's changed since that era is watching sports on your couch is that much better.
Oh, absolutely.
And
Easier.
so absolutely. And better quality.
Yeah.
And you can get lettuce at the grocery store for the same that you'd buy nachos at the Saddle Dome now. So you can have a very healthy snack while you're at it.
How long have you been sitting on that? How long have you been workshopping that?
So supporting a rebuild is different.
I agree.
You might be the first one to go buy a Connor Bedard jersey.
Yeah.
But what happens when you pick 5th? And then, okay, it's a process.
Or when you pick Sam Bennett at 4.
Yeah.
And I'm not crapping all over the pick.
No, it was a bad draft.
But it's the highest, they've only done that twice, right? And then
just once.
No, before that. That's what I mean. They've done it twice. No, I thought they did. I thought they drafted 4th twice. Wasn't Corey Stillman a 4th pick?
Overall? No, maybe in the Atlanta days, but 6th was the highest.
6th was the highest. 4th was the highest they ever picked. Okay. Yeah. Because I've been saying that wrong for 2 weeks. So thank you for correcting.
And one of their, maybe I'm wrong on this, but one of their 6th picks, I think, was Daniel Tkachuk.
Yes, it was.
So
yeah.
Rebuild.
Very well. And I don't disagree with that, Wes. But on the same token, I don't think you should run around saying I'm not allowed to say the R word.
No, I agree with you there. Yeah. But I think you need to get, for a rebuild to make sense, you need to get organically bad. And
well, you know what? You know where this could have happened? This could have happened in 14-15. But the Find a Way freaking Flames ruined it.
Yeah. And listen, maybe it can happen in a couple of years. If all these guys after this season are, if the rumblings that we're hearing that a bunch of guys already want out, maybe you organically are going to start to get to where it would make sense to rebuild. But right now, with all these veterans,
it was an underperforming team.
Well, and you've just committed $150 million or something in that range to a couple of forwards that you've sort of committed to at least trying to win with for a while, right?
Yeah.
And so
I don't think they're as bad off as everybody makes them. I think next year could be, but I would come back to you, and I fully understand what I'm about to say. I know there's more, but tell me from your vantage point, having worked the whole season, now looking back, how fractured was the relationship in the room, do you think, between the coach and the players, or was that kind of oversold?
Well, I think with that sort of coach, and when I say that sort of coach, I mean a guy who
hard-ass old school.
Yeah, who's sort of stepping on your you-know-what all the time.
Yep.
If you're not winning, it's tough.
Yep.
Always. Yep. With that kind of coach, and you would have said the same even, Bob Hartley was a
yes, he was
a guy who did not coach with a velvet glove. And so when you have a coach like that and you're not having success, there's trouble there.
Yeah.
I wonder, and I don't know the answer to this, but it's not like Daryl doesn't have supporters in the Flames locker room. And so
your top player this year said he'd come back and sign to play for him.
Right. And so I wonder potentially if there was a split between the guys who were bought in and the guys who weren't necessarily bought in. It was weird. We all saw the tweet from Jonathan Huberdeau's agent. There's no joy at the Saddle Dome. The next day, all we heard was, "Oh, we love each other in here." And
kind of an overcorrection.
As Peter Labardius always puts it, you kind of hear that when there's problems.
Mm-hmm.
Teams that are really tight don't need to tell you all the time how tight they are.
Nope.
And so now that was just one day of the season, but this idea, and I know it's not what you're saying, but there's this idea floating around that you take Daryl and you extricate him and everything's going to be fine.
Right.
It's oversimplified.
Yeah.
In my opinion.
No, I think Rhett Warner shares that. I think it's good for headlines. It's good for social media.
You got to blame someone.
Somebody needs to take the fall, right? And there's a schism in the dressing room and things like that, but it's not that simple, right? To your point, you are not the first person, and I don't mean that negatively. All I mean is that I'm actually kind of glad to hear it from you, because now I think that's where I would start paying more attention. That the real split was in the within the players, not between the players and the coach. You know what I'm saying? Like we always thought it was the players and the coach. I guess we need to look a little closer at how close that team was as a group.
Yeah, and I can't stress enough that I don't know for sure.
How would we?
What was going on in that room, but it's not like nobody was supporting the coach.
And say what you will about Alan Walsh, who is Huberdeau's agent. He has a history of doing this, and he's doing it on behalf, like everybody says. Everybody's if he does that on his own, he's out. Huberdeau would get rid of him. But he did it for Derek Brassard when he was in Columbus. He did it for was it Halak? Which goalie? Yeah, he did it for Halak.
He did it for Marc-Andre Fleury.
He did it for Marc-Andre Fleury.
He did it for Michael Frolik.
That's right. He did it for Frolik. So there's two examples. To me, I don't have to like it, but it does make me pay attention because I think he's doing the bidding of the player.
Absolutely. And I'm sure, and, I'd love to be a fly on the wall for that conversation between Jonathan and his agent, but Jonathan then can come out the next day and say, well, guys, that was
slow down.
That was my agent.
Bad agent.
You'd have to ask him.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, that's
still his agent, right?
It's a play, like that's in the playbook.
It's in the playbook.
Jonathan, tell them they'll have to ask me. Don't worry about it. I've done this.
I've got your back, buddy.
Now, listen, I'm sure that for Jonathan Huberdeau, there were a lot of, oh my God, what is going on here moments. This is a guy who's really hard on himself, who had a rotten season offensively at the worst time, because not only was he trying to follow up on the best season of his career, but he was also trying to justify the largest contract in franchise history.
Yep.
And I stood in front of Jonathan Huberdeau over and over and over. I joked, if that's the right way to put it, throughout the season. You couldn't ask Jonathan Huberdeau you couldn't ask him what the weather was like without him telling you he'd like to have more points. He went out of his way to be accountable.
And I call that the Tony Amonte rule. Because when Tony Amonte was here, we would go and ask him, Tony, you're doing a great job killing penalties. What's the success of the penalty kill? I've got to find a way to create more offense.
That's exactly what we heard from Jonathan.
And to me, that's an athlete, and that's front of mind for that athlete. That is absolutely, when they are going there on their own without being prodded, that's front of mind. And if he's constantly doing that, then he's obsessing. That's a technical term we doctors of psychology use. But you know what I
might. Do you mind if I use that sometime?
Feel free.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
That's a freebie. Take it.
Yeah, and so there was a lot more that went into that than just getting comfortable in Calgary, just understanding how to play under the coach, all of that.
Yeah.
But, if we sat here, if you and I were sitting here in September, say August, because the contract wasn't done yet.
Yeah.
And you said, give me the worst case scenario for Jonathan Huberdeau's first season in Calgary. We were not very far off.
Nope. Outside of a major injury, catastrophic injury at the beginning of the year, if you told me he was going to play most of the season, if not the entire season, this is it.
Yeah.
This is it.
Yeah. And it went poorly from...
But I also believe, we were talking about legacy before for Tree.
Yeah.
I also believe in many ways, Brad Treliving believed he had to do that. He had to give him that deal. He had to show, he had to. And again, easy for me to say, and I sound like a Brad apologist, but this town was so fragile, right? It just gotten beaten by its own worst enemy in the second round after it won game one and looked like it was going to win game two.
Right.
And that whole hangover came right to the end of the calendar hockey year, the end of June, and it could not have got any worse. And for 3 days there, it was Death Valley.
Yeah.
Who was buying tickets? Who was going to come and watch this?
Yeah.
Right. And I feel like he had no choice in his own mind. Not only did he have to get that, he had to get that guy locked in too.
If you went the opposite way and Jonathan Huberdeau's unsigned into January, there is a 5-alarm fire every day on he's going to leave.
100%.
No market.
100%.
Even Toronto does not do the guess who wants to play here like Montreal does?
Yep.
If there is Quebec-raised star player, we're seeing it with Pierre-Luc Dubois.
I was
right
just
now
about
in
to
Winnipeg,
say,
right?
They'd be playing together, wouldn't they?
That was it's all you would hear. He must want to go to Montreal. He must want to go to Montreal. He must want to go to Montreal.
Yeah.
And so, and on Jonathan's side of the fence, hey, I just had 115 points. Of course I'll talk long-term extension. Everyone says, well, they got to re-sign Tyler Toffoli. Well, yeah, absolutely. They should.
Coming off his best season?
He just had his best season. It's a really hard time to sign a guy to a good contract.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Of course Nazem Kadri wanted to sign for 7 years. He just had his best season.
Yeah. Yep.
So those are tough contracts to sign and really tough contracts to win. And I guarantee when Brad Treliving, and when I say guarantee, I certainly haven't heard this from Brad or anyone, but I'm sure he knew it wasn't going to look great after a while. 10.5 is a lot of money for anybody.
Yeah, but he didn't think he'd see the end of it.
Well, and he didn't think it would look like way too much money at this point.
If I was to fill you full of pendiums, what's the movie drug that we give you to tell the truth? Pentothal, right?
Is that what it is?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
Anyway, I'm old. I can't remember. But
is that what I was supposed to grab on the way
I think
in
so.
today?
If I filled you full of truth serum and I asked you what kind of season is he going to have next year? Because I think he has a bounce back season.
I think so. I
don't think he gets 116.
No,
but I expect 80.
I was just going to say I'd put him at around a point per game.
Yep. That's where I think he goes.
I kind of want to know what sort of news comes in the next month, though.
I think all of that is an influence.
You got to find him a line mate.
Yes, you do.
And I'm not even saying you have to go find him a line mate in free agency or in a trade. You just have to. You got to make something work here. That him and Nazem Kadri had the chemistry of I don't even know what.
Sodium pentothal. That's what I had to fill you.
Coffee and mayonnaise. Did you see that about the NFL draft?
No.
Well, this poor kid who sat through the first round last night didn't get picked. There's a clip of him saying, well, sometimes I put mayonnaise in my coffee, which is disgusting. Anyway, I was thinking of something that has no chemistry. And so I came, as you know, I'm very topical.
I understand that.
Yeah. So,
listen, I do want to get to one of your passions. So let me just limit it to a couple more hockey questions. One, and you mentioned it, guys that could play on his line. The listeners and the viewers of this podcast know they're going to repeat the words right out of my mouth because I've said it since I started doing this in February. I really don't have any personal bias against Daryl. I like Daryl. I really do. And he's treated me really well. My critique of Daryl this year was I was really disappointed in the fact that Mathew Phillips did not get a legitimate opportunity here. When you look at how many overtime games this team played, how many one-goal games, he played 2 games. I thought he was noticeable in both. He contributed in both, but that was it. That's all. And I also know that part of that is Daryl believes that a player should come to the NHL ready. He shouldn't be developing players. And I think he felt like he had to develop that player. I'm really disappointed that Mathew Phillips didn't get a legitimate shot. I don't think he got a legitimate shot here.
There's no way that you could say he got a legitimate shot. And I was on 2 road trips that Mathew Phillips was on. So we all thought he was going to debut in Columbus, and then they had this weird thing going on with someone on waivers, and so Horna gets called up. He debuted anyway. So then he plays in Toronto and plays in Montreal.
Yep.
Hit the post in Montreal, I think.
Was on the ice for a power play goal in Toronto, I believe.
Yeah, played on the second unit both nights. And so plays those 2 games, comes home, he's scratched for a couple, and then the Flames went on a 4-game road trip, 2 in San Jose, and then the 2 SoCal spots, and he was healthy. So I saw Mathew Phillips a lot in the press box. You don't talk to a healthy scratch middle of the game, but I was sitting where Mathew Phillips was sitting. And you could not, nobody at the Saddle Dome could look you in the eye and say, we gave him a shot. And if there was ever a downside, and maybe that's not the right way to put it, if there was ever a downside to having your AHL team in your own backyard, it would be that Daryl had made up his mind on Mathew Phillips from what he'd already watched. He'd decided, despite all the goals he'd seen, despite the impact he'd seen Mathew Phillips have on the power play, despite the fact that Daryl's son Brett raves about Mathew Phillips as a person and what kind of is part of the leadership group for the Wranglers, despite all that, Daryl's mind was made up on Mathew Phillips. And so, and maybe that was the first official glimpse of the power struggle we got is Brad finally said, I'm bringing him up. And Daryl said, fine.
He's sitting, but you can bring him up. Yeah.
Yeah. And so now, because he didn't play enough NHL games over a certain span, he becomes an unrestricted free agent this summer. Mathew Phillips, despite growing up in Calgary, despite loving Calgary, Mathew Phillips should be, and I'm sure will be, looking for an opportunity somewhere else. He will be, maybe he won't receive as much interest. The Flames won't be the only organization that has people in it that don't think that Mathew Phillips can do it.
I agree.
I spent a lot of time asking scouts about Mathew Phillips because I was curious.
Yeah.
And the knock or the question is, at his size, is he explosive enough? When you're really small, you also need to be like a plus skater, and they're not sure Mathew Phillips is that.
Yeah.
All that said, I think back to Austin Czarnik.
Mm-hmm.
Here was a guy who put up huge numbers in the AHL, had never really gotten an opportunity in the NHL. When he signed in Calgary, I think we heard that 20-some teams had expressed interest in him.
Yep.
I don't know if it's going to be 20-something, but there'll be a team. And probably if you're Mathew Phillips, you should be looking at the teams that are in the lottery.
Yep.
That'll say, we need some talent. We're going to give this guy a look. And if he pops, or even if he just becomes a regular, he's not going to be the same player as Paul Byron, but if he
became Paul Byron,
a guy who plays 75 to 80 games a night or a season, for whatever city he ends up in, people are always going to look back and say, we never give this kid a true chance, and they'll be right.
And I think it stings too, because of exactly what you said a couple of times. He's a local guy. And there's a value to that. There just is. And I understand it's a game and we got to make decisions. No, it's not. It's a business. Don't ever fool yourself. That's why there were lockouts. It's a business. And you're right, dude. They've got to sell tickets. And he could have sold them a few tickets. Like, I get it. I understand it. I just think it was a miss.
And
I just think it was a miss.
And if the kid isn't going to play at the NHL level, let him decide it.
Yeah.
Let's see it.
Yeah.
Let's play him for 6 or 7 in a row. I just listed all those cities I watched, watched games that he was also watching it. If he played those 9 in a row when he was called up, or he played 8 of 9, and then you looked at it and said, and don't get me wrong, I'm not sure 8 or 9 games is a legit look.
No, but
at least you've given him some runway.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, we're talking about a guy who scored 15 game-winning goals in the American Hockey League this season.
Yep.
If you had a guy who had scored 15 game-winning goals, was on the prospect side of the age spectrum, and by that I just mean, we're not talking about a 33-year-old who's been in the AHL forever. We're not talking about Alan Quine.
No.
How's that for a reference?
Buddy Robinson.
Yeah.
Right?
The real
Alan Quine. Yeah, no, Quine. But Quine had he played playoff games for the Islanders.
Right. But that was a guy who at 30 or whatever was putting up big numbers in the A, but his time had passed.
Yep.
And so we're not talking about that with Mathew Phillips. We're talking about a guy who should be just coming into his best years.
Right.
Are his best years going to be good enough that he can be an NHLer? We won't find out in this city.
No. Last one, and then I want to ask you about some golf things. You put out a tweet, and this isn't about the decision. We've already talked about the decision. This is about the human being. You put out a tweet about Brad that I thought, and I retweeted it because I thought it was really him.
Yeah.
Like, that's, you know, it's a business to be hired and fired. He'll be okay. He's happy, wealthy. He'll get another job, but he's a good human being. You put it out. I think Will put one out, or Will not put out.
Yeah.
He's a little bit of a different guy in our world, isn't he?
Yeah. And so for those who haven't seen it, I can share, I still have on my phone, a text saved from Brad, a long enough text that you have to scroll all the way up and down your iPhone twice to read it.
Yeah.
And he sent me that on the day 5 and change years ago that my dad passed away.
Right.
We're talking, October, right before the season started. And as it turns out, Brad had lost his mom. I believe it was the previous year. I could be wrong on the exact timeline, but we're talking about probably 150-word text message saying, I know what it's like, not just, hey, my condolences, Brad.
Mm-hmm.
I know what it's like. If you ever want to talk, please call me. Just I read it again that day and was sort of back on the brink of the emotions that it brought on that day. But it tells you, and Will Knoll has a similar story. Like, this is a really good dude.
Yeah.
This is a really good dude who was a really good ambassador for the city of Calgary and for the Flames organization for the past 9 seasons.
Yep. And
this is a dude who's going to be a really good hire for another NHL team, I think, sooner than later.
I agree. And my version of that is, I mean, I would go to him and go, hey, Brad, we want to do a coaching. Yep. That was him. He didn't let me finish. He just, anything I ever asked him to, if he'd help in the community, he was there. Now, you got to win. I get that. That's not what this is. I just wanted to make sure that we were, because I loved it.
It's important to highlight because
they're human beings.
It's easy to move the pieces around.
Yeah,
right?
and I can share stories about Daryl in the same vein too. Right?
Absolutely, and so can I.
Yeah, exactly. So sometimes it's hard because it feels like, it feels like you're picking a side. It's not a matter of picking it. It's the whole thing's weird.
Well, and it's part of, it's part of the privilege of the job. We do get to know them a little bit.
Sure.
We can probably share. It doesn't happen as often with the players, but a guy gets traded or a guy gets, signs elsewhere. There's stories like that. Not necessarily the same, but like these are people.
Some really good dudes.
Yeah.
There's some really good dudes.
Yeah.
Before I let you go, I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you a little bit about golf.
Feels like golf weather out there.
It feels like golf weather. We're about to have some really cool things happen in this city when it comes to golf, aren't we?
Absolutely. Yeah. The next, let's say the next summer and a half. But if you just want to recap the sort of local golf news in the last couple of months. So the LPGA Tour or Golf Canada announces that the Canadian Women's Open is going to be played at Earl Grey next summer, just down the road.
Yep.
For those who don't know where Earl Grey Golf Club is, it's overlooking the Glenmore Reservoir essentially at the end of Crowchild Trail. Yep. And so if there was ever, the LPGA has been to Prentice Greens a couple of times and you'd hear, wow, it was too far to go. The shuttle ride was too long for fans. Like, this is going to be as accessible of a tournament as you could imagine.
Right.
And so Brooke Henderson,
I was just going to say,
like the things she is doing on the LPGA Tour and the impact she's having on golf everywhere, not just in Canada, is remarkable. Brooke and all her friends will be at Earl Grey next summer. So that's number one.
Yep.
You've got the Canadian Women's Open. You've got, just tucked into all the news about what's going on with the telecom giants, the Shaw Charity Classic is going to be extended. I think the commitment was another 10 years.
So I'm going to stop you right there. Tell us a little bit, for those who don't follow golf, tell us exactly how important but impressive this tournament has become and how quickly it has become that.
Well, especially it's a PGA Tour Champions event, which is essentially
the old senior tour.
It's the senior tour. It's 50 and over. And they are raising charity dollars with this event that tour had never heard of. they broke they initially set the record for the largest, single season, let's call it, charitable give in Champions Tour history, PGA Tour Champions history. And then every year they just break it.
Yep.
Our buddy Chris Dornan has the template, public relations ace, communications ace. He's got the template, I'm sure, on his computer. New record. Here's the new number.
Here it is. Yeah. Oh, okay.
Okay. Yeah. Ho hum. Here's another one.
Yeah.
And so, the significance of then the title sponsor wanting to stick around after the merger with Shaw, that long-term commitment is great news for golf fans, but it's also, in a community where we're talking about like millions and millions every year. I forget what it was this past season, like 17 million or something they raised.
Yeah, it's a boon for charities in this
200 children's-based charities. Like you couldn't hit a pitching wedge without, running into a charity that's been impacted, and so that part of it is absolutely huge. And it's going to be back at Canyon Meadows this year. And then the sort of third bit is that the PGA Tour Canada, which is a developmental tour that it was a starting point for Corey Connors and you name it, all these guys who are playing on the PGA Tour, they're having their season-ending championship at Country Hills this year. And so that's an event that's never been in Calgary before. That's an event that the guy who wins is automatically going to play in a PGA Tour event the next week.
Right.
Like, this is a stepping stone circuit, but we're not talking about having to wait for the step very long.
Yeah.
And so the person who finishes atop the money list on that event is automatically exempt on the Corn Ferry Tour, the next level, the next season. And so see you later. Just, that's all getting sealed in Calgary this year. And so in what has always been a very golf mad market, like, there's a lot to look forward to here.
I'm excited about it. What about you? Do you have any, are you checking any off the bucket list this year?
TBD. Nothing booked, but yeah, the bucket list will need some new ink on it. And so I'll have to figure something out here.
Outstanding. Wes, I appreciate this, sir. This was a fun conversation.
Yeah, I enjoyed it.
I always appreciate your point of view. And like I say, you can get no bigger endorsement than you are my mom's favorite reporter. So hopefully we'll get you on again. I hope they spread the information out for you. They don't have to, lump it all in at a draft or something.
I'm going to jump in my car and phone my mom and just make sure I'm her favorite reporter too.
I haven't heard any different, but you probably should get that confirmation. Thanks, Wes.
Thank you.
Wes Gilbertson from Postmedia.